The Houthis might have just blown up an American aircraft carrier. In fact, they claim they hit it with multiple missiles and drones. But before I get to that, this is my weekly news recap summarising all of the news from the last week. As I was saying, on Friday, the Houthis claimed that they successfully hit the USS Eisenhower with multiple missiles and drones. The Houthis say that the reasons for these strikes was due to the previous day's Western strikes on Yemen. And the Houthis say that those strikes led to the deaths of 16 people along with another 41 people being injured. And they say that most of those deaths were civilians, including women and children. Now, I will say that there is basically no proof of this aircraft carrier being hit, but it's worth noting that the Houthis did seem extremely confident about it. In fact, the leader of the Houthis even encouraged the US Navy to do a live stream of the ship to show that there was no damage that took place to it. Now, another reason people are speculating that the ship may have been hit was due to what the captain posted on Twitter. On Saturday, the captain posted a video of a fighter jet landing on the aircraft carrier. And it appears that the captain posted this in order to disprove the many rumours that the Houthis had actually hit the ship. Except the only issue is that the video he posted on Twitter was actually first posted on the 31st of March, meaning it's over 3 months old. And as you can imagine, as soon as people found that out, it only added fuel to the fire and made the US Navy look even worse. It's worth noting, however, that the Houthis usually release proof of all of their attacks, except for this one they unusually didn't. And even if they did hit the aircraft carrier, it's worth remembering that the damage is probably minimal, especially when you look at the damage they do to the cargo ships. I will also say personally that it is basically impossible to hit an aircraft carrier due to the sheer amount of defences and the other frigates and destroyers that surround them. They're basically one of the most protected things on Earth. And because of that, unless there is clear video proof that they actually hit the aircraft carrier, I don't believe that they've actually hit it. Now, staying on the Houthis in Yemen, on Saturday the 29th, they shot down their 6th MQ-9 Reaper drone. And with each of these drones costing more than $30 million, that's almost a $200 million loss for the US. And unlike the usual ones, this drone actually landed in such good condition that the Houthis are going to be able to send it to Iran and they'll be able to replicate it. So it's totally possible that you could see the Houthis and Iran using an improved version of the MQ-9 Reaper drone within the next few months. And on top of this, it is worth remembering that the US spent billions of dollars developing the intelligence system that is on board that drone. So this is a pretty big loss for the US if Iran is able to replicate the drone and its intelligence system. And even if Iran isn't able to replicate it, Iran is most likely going to at least learn stuff about how the US gathers their intelligence. Now, moving on to Europe, on Thursday the 27th, the EU was reportedly considering placing sanctions onto Israel. And the reason for these sanctions was due to Israel ignoring the ICJ ruling. And this ICJ ruling they are ignoring is the most recent one of the ICJ saying that Israel has to stop their attacks on Rafah. However, it is worth noting that if the EU was to place sanctions onto Israel, it's unlikely they would have much effect on the war. And that's mainly because the US would most likely bail Israel out and send them all of the money that they need. Now, keeping on Europe, as of May the 28th, Ireland, Spain and Norway have each officially recognised Palestine as a state. The Spanish president even gave a speech on this, saying that they now recognise Palestine as a state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And all three of these countries says that this isn't done to increase tensions with Israel, but it's actually done to have peace in the region. They say that the recognition of a Palestinian state is the only way to have lasting peace in the region. But in response to this, as you'd expect, Netanyahu has said that these countries are standing on the wrong side of history and they are choosing to reward terrorism. Now, staying on Israel, if you may remember, last week the US aid pier that was built for Gaza fell to pieces and washed up on a beach in Ashdod in Israel. This was the $320 million aid pier that was built to bring more humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now, when that pier fell to pieces last week, it was reconstructed just a day later. It's been a week now since that incident, except it appears that the pier may have just sunk. Between the 29th and the 30th of May, approximately 4 or 5 days after that pier fell to pieces, satellite images showed that the pier just disappeared. And satellite pictures searching across the whole of Gaza showed that the pier is nowhere to be found. And considering there's been no comment from the US on this, it's actually a fair conclusion to think that maybe the pier has just totally sunk. In fact, people in Gaza took a video of it and said that the pier looked as if it was sinking on these same dates. And it is entirely possible that the pier has sunk, considering just some small waves washed it away last week. And if this is true, considering the pier costs $320 million billion to build, it's a massive embarrassment for the US. But if the US comments on this, I'll definitely make a video on that. Now moving to Iran, Iran has officially started sending weapons to the Sudanese government to help them fight against the RSF. Now this new military support from Iran has come just 3 months after the Sudanese foreign minister made an unprecedented visit to Iran. When he visited, Iran and Sudan officially regained their ties after being severed for over 6 years. So both Iran and Sudan are coming together to work together. If you don't know, the Sudanese government is currently fighting a war against the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF militant group, which tried to overthrow them. Now the RSF is accused of war crimes, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and a whole load of other really bad things. And the UAE has been accused by loads of people of supporting this RSF group. Except it is worth noting that the UAE has strongly denied all of these claims. But if they are actually supporting the RSF, then Iran is now basically fighting a proxy war against the UAE. But it doesn't seem like anything is really happening with this war, and it only seems like things are going to get worse. Now staying on Iran, 2 weeks ago on my first weekly news recap, I covered India signing a deal with Iran to build their southern port, which is going to change the future of shipping lanes. Now this new shipping port will create a line all the way from Russia down to Iran and then to India without ever having to go through any Western controlled shipping lanes. This means that the West will no longer have any control over the Russian cargo ships that are travelling through their shipping lanes, because there are just total new ones going from Russia to Iran. Now as I said in that first video, the way this route will work is the cargo will travel on trains all the way down to Iran's southern port, which India has just funded the building of. Now the reason I'm talking about this is that that railway has now been totally completed. Of course the port will have to be built before those cargo shipping lanes come into place, but it's worth noting that the railway has now been completed. On top of that, the port is expected to be completed just within the next 12 months. And that means that the West will lose control of the eastern cargo ships within the space of just this year. But with this new railway being completed, it shows to the West that Iran isn't messing about with this idea of creating a new global shipping route. But finally, some positive news. The Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has been discharged from hospital and he's now back in his home. If you don't know, he was shot at least 4 times and he was in critical condition for quite a few days. As well as that, the attacker was charged with attempted murder and faces up to 25 years in prison. But it's good to know that Robert Fico is going to be okay. Now separately, this final part is important, at least for me. We've now been totally demonetized, meaning we can no longer fund the making of any of these videos. And we weren't even provided with a reason why we were demonetized. It just got taken away. So if you want to help fund the making of these videos, you can join our Patreon. And we're definitely not asking for loads, just instead of giving your money to the BBC, maybe consider giving us your £5 a month instead. But to join the Patreon, you can either go to the top link in the description or you can go to alexbarnicoat.com. I want to make clear though, it's definitely not compulsory. If you subscribe, we are just as grateful. And I completely understand if you just can't afford it. But for anyone that's interested, the sources for all of this information will be in the description below. Along with that, the links to all of my socials will be there and you can probably see them on screen now. But with that, thanks for watching and hopefully I'll see you at the same time next week.